To bring in Jonathan Turley. Professor, good afternoon to you. I was watching your Twitter feed light up today during that 90-minute press conference. It was something else, and that's why we brought you on today. First, though, here is Rudy Giuliani, one of the points that he is trying to drive home. Watch here.
These cities are cities that are controlled by Democrats, which means they can get away with anything they want to do. It means they have a certain degree of control over, certainly control the election board completely. And they control law enforcement, and unfortunately, they have some friendly judges that will issue ridiculously irrational opinions just to come out in their favor.
So on that point, he was suggesting that the pattern is same throughout these cities and states. How did you hear it?
Well, he was going beyond that. Most of us thought he'd be talking about such boring things as authentication machines for signatures. And instead we got a global communist conspiracy that even featured the dead Hugo Chavez. I mean, it was quite a thing. The only thing missing was a sinister figure petting a white cat. I mean, it was very heavy stuff. And the only good news is that this will have to end up in court, because if they are not going to present this evidence in court as part of an election challenge, they probably will be forced to do so in defense of a defamation claim, because this company and its officers could well sue them if they can't prove these allegations. I mean, it was one of the most amazing press conferences that I have seen.
What Jenna Ellis said is that this amounts to an opening statement. All right, and we've heard from you and Ken Starr and Andy McCarthy and others talking about it takes time to gather the evidence. Is that the state of their case as of today?
No, I'm very sympathetic to the argument that it does take time to get affidavits and evidence. On that part, they were perfectly valid in saying that they're now moving towards court. But this is really not the time for opening statements. This is the time for hard evidence. And this press conference was long on heated rhetoric and short on hard evidence. I mean, I think that they're going to have to produce this evidence fairly quickly because these allegations are sweeping, they're disturbing. Either way, if they're true or untrue, they're disturbing. I am going to make the presumption that these attorneys can support these arguments, because if they cannot, they honestly could be subject to, and the Trump campaign could be subject to, a legal action by the company.
How do you move a court at this point?
Well, they've raised some, issues that we've read about before. These questions about overvoting, repeated submission of balloting. They have a lot of affidavits, people who are making statements under the penalty of perjury. And their point is that most of the cases that have been dismissed were not their cases, and that they're now ready to roll. All right, but we're running out of runway. I mean, certifications will begin next week. And so I think that they have to realize time is of the essence. And so if that was their opening statement, they better move to their closing statement pretty fast.
So is it the certification that becomes paramount now? Or is it when the electors are appointed on the 14th of December? Because if that's the case, this is going to run for a little bit here, because it's 3.5 weeks from now.
It can run, but I got to tell you, that's my worst nightmare, is to see a challenge occurring past the certification stage. That's one of the reasons I've been telling people that they shouldn't be fighting these challenges, that President-elect Biden should have told his campaign to stand down, let these things be heard, let people hear the evidence. The worst scenario is that this bleeds past the certification, and then you will have arguments that states like Michigan or Pennsylvania should not certify their votes. That would lead to a bloodletting on the floor of Congress, and we don't need that as a country. I mean, this country is a powder keg, and we need to find ways to reduce that temperature. There's a couple of ways to do that. I mean, President Trump should have called for the ascertainment of the election. I said 2 weeks ago it should have been ascertained so that President-elect Biden can start in his transition. It doesn't bind anyone. It's not a certification, but he can do that and say, I'm still going to challenge these results. And President-elect Biden
he was
should
saying,
be making a...
Right, he was saying repeatedly that in 2000, 20 years ago, you had 37 days between Gore and Bush. Is that not valid?
It is valid, but when it comes to ascertaining the election, that's a responsible thing to do. It's also a responsible thing for President-elect Biden to come forward and say, look, these attacks on Trump and Republican lawyers are outrageous. And I support looking at these allegations. I don't believe that they're true, but I understand that over 72 million people voted against me, and I want them to feel confident that these things have been heard.
Okay.
But today's press conference was really something.
Professor, good to get your insight. Thank you, sir, very much. Jonathan Turley from Washington, D.C.